Effortless English by Hoge. Chapter 1. A better way to learn English. If you pick up this book, chances you've wanted to speak English for a while. Maybe you've even taken classes. You probably need English to improve your career. Maybe you want to travel internationally or study abroad. You know that English is the key to international business and international travel. So let me ask you something. Do you feel nervous or shy when you try to speak English? Do you struggle to understand what someone is saying to you despite years of study? Are you embarrassed about your pronunciation or word you speak too slowly? Are you frustrated that despite all the time you've invested in learning English, you still can't speak it? Despite your goals, is it difficult for you to actually use English in your job, travels, or studies? Do you sometimes feel that you'll never master spoken English? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you're not alone. In fact, you're fairly typical. Most English students feel this way. Most English learners are stressed and frustrated about their speaking ability. Some feel completely hopeless and feel they never be able to speak English powerfully. Not because they are bad at language, but because, like you, they've been taught using the wrong methods. The good thing is that it doesn't have to be like this. There's nothing wrong with you. You can learn to speak English naturally and with ease. You can use English effectively in your job, travels, and studies. You can feel relaxed and confident every time you speak English. In fact, as a long-time English teacher, I've helped thousands of students all over the world become fluent and powerful English speakers. How did they do it? I did it using a teaching method that I developed called Effortless English. Effortless English enables you to learn English naturally and automatically, the way children learn before they enter school. Too often, English classes get so focused on tests, textbooks, grades, and levels that students forget why they're there in the first place. They forget about the real world, goals of a more successful career and exciting international travel. With effortless English, you never lose sight of the fact that the ultimate goal of learning a language is communication. Instead, learn to speak English both quickly and with more precision, effortlessly. I understand if you're skeptical, particularly if you've been trying to learn English the traditional way. You put in the hours memorizing vocabulary lists, doing grammar drills, reading boring textbooks. Now you're thinking, can speaking English possibly be effortless? Believe me, I feel your pain. Back when I started teaching 15 years ago, my students were all excited to begin conversing in English, and I was excited to help them. At that time, I taught in the usual way. I used textbooks and focused on teaching grammar. I thought this was the best way to teach, and none of my students complained. I still remember one particularly intelligent student of mine from Venezuela named Gladys. Gladys was determined to speak English well. Talk about effort. Gladys attended every one of my classes. She always sat in the center of the front row. I can still picture her, eager and smiling face. She took detailed notes and listened to every word I said. She also studied at home every day. Gladys studied her English textbooks for 4 hours or more. She also tried to learn 50 new vocabulary words by memorizing word lists. Gladys was my star student, and I too was sure she would succeed. 6 months later, however, she still could barely speak English. Her speech was hesitant and unnatural. She constantly made a grammar mistake with even the simplest sentence. Her pronunciation was difficult to understand. She still taught in Spanish and tried to translate to and from English when he spoke. Worst of all, Gladys felt nervous every time she tried to speak English. Speaking English was a painful experience for her. Gladys was extremely frustrated. After so much effort, she had barely improved. As her teacher, I was too frustrated. I was sure Gladys would improve quickly and could understand why she had not. I followed all of the traditional teaching methods. I used the standard textbooks and the standard classroom activities. Gladys was intelligent, disciplined, and consistent, and yet her English speaking barely improved. But sadly, I realized that Gladys wasn't the only one who had not improved. Her classmate also had barely improved. It was frustrating, and felt like a complete failure as a teacher. But when I asked my colleagues to help, it turned out they had the same problem. Very few of their students were improving either. At that point, I realized something was wrong. Something is wrong with standard methods for teaching English. The worst part for me was that everyone accepted this situation as normal. The other teacher didn't seem to be concerned about their students' lack of progress. All the teachers were using the same methods and getting the same poor results. In most parts of the world, students study English in school for years, yet the vast majority of them learn to speak English well. After years of study, they still have trouble with real English conversations. They still feel nervous and shy about speaking. A few years after my experience with Gladys, I got a job as an English teaching assistant. In Japan, I was excited and eager to help these young students learn my language. I still remember my first day. I was sitting at the front of the class next to the main teacher, who was Japanese. As the students came into the room, they saw me and giggled nervously. They sat down and continued to shyly glance up at me. They were sweet and curious. Then the class started. The main teacher wrote an English sentence on the board. I don't remember the exact sentence, but it was something like, "The little girl goes to school." The teacher pointed to the sentence and began to talk Japanese. The students all grabbed their notebooks and began writing. Everyone was very serious. Next, the teacher circled the word goes. She pointed at the word and continued speaking in Japanese. She talked and talked and talked in Japanese. The students wrote quickly, filling their notebooks with information. Finally, the teacher drew a line from the word goes to the word girl, and then she talked more. On and on in Japanese. This continued for the entire class. The teacher drew lines, circles, and squares. She used different colors, chalk, and continued speaking Japanese. I was totally confused. I'm a native speaker of English, and I was sitting in the beginning English class, yet I could not understand anything in the class except for the one sentence I was thinking to myself. What could this teacher possibly be talking about so much? It's just one sentence. Yet the teacher spent an entire hour analyzing, explaining, and dissecting. That one simple sentence finally, at the end of the class, the teacher asked me to read the sentence aloud for pronunciation. I read the sentence a couple times, and that was the only real English input the students got that day. Sadly, the same pattern repeated every day. That my day, I watched students' enthusiasm and curiosity disappear. They become bored, stressed, and confused. Every day, they wrote pages of notes mostly in Japanese. Every day, the teacher talked and talked and talked mostly in Japanese. I couldn't understand why an English class was being taught mostly in Japanese. During the average class, the students were listening to Japanese 90% of the time or more. They heard very little English. No wonder why they never learned to speak. No wonder they were frustrated and confused. Honestly, it broke my heart to watch as the schools crush these students' natural love of learning. It was terrible to watch them grow bored, frustrated, and stressed. And 6 months later, one of the students couldn't speak to me at all, not even the simplest conversation. This kind of situation is repeated in English classes all over the world. My experience with Gladys and in Japan convinced me that traditional English language education is broken. I know there had to be a better way to help my students. speak English than what we are doing. So I began to search for a better way. I devoured books about English teaching. I constantly tried out new methods in my classes. I read research studies, and I traveled and taught English in other parts of the world. So, that's the end of our chapter 1. So, this is AJ Hug, director. Bye.